Good day, good night, good evening, everybody. Welcome to Web3 Weekly. I'm Crypto Kenny. I'm joined today by Nate, uh, co-founder, along with myself of the Alpha Mutants NFT project. Before we get into any of the good stuff, if you are not subscribed to the channel, subscribe, like, down below. If you're not following myself, Nate, the Alpha Mutants, you're missing out on a lot of alpha. You're missing out on a lot of opinions in the space and, direction. A lot of times we post, what we're personally doing as far as investments in the space. So if you haven't got all that done, check that out. I will link a couple of our more watch previous videos up here at the top, so you can check out a few interviews with some cool projects that have been dropping lately. We've got the estates that'll be up there that you can check out theirs. They just minted out their second batch here about a week ago, so you can watch that video on that project. So today we are going to be doing a segment about some structures inside of the space. So we're specifically going to be discussing DAOs and how the DAO structure works inside of cryptocurrency projects, how it works inside of NFT projects, what the pros and cons are. And we're going to be talking about a few other microstructures inside the space and just give you guys I understand there's some people out there that really like these topics, and there's some that find them really boring. But I will tell you right now, if you are into NFTs, if you are into DeFi, if you are into any of these more complex structures on the blockchain, you need to understand, how these systems operate and how what potentially the downfalls are and what potentially the upside is of these types of structures. So we're going to talk about that today with Nate. Nate's a great person to talk about on this subject because not only is he deeply involved with a lot of NFT projects and gets into those type of things, but he, like myself, is involved with one of the better DAO structures I've seen in the space. So we're going to talk a little about that, and he's had experience with some really failed DAO structures, which we'll discuss also. So Nate, thanks for being on today. We're filming on a Saturday here. This will probably be dropping on a Thursday, but appreciate you taking time Saturday to talk with me about the space and about some DAO structures. So welcome,
Yeah, of
welcome.
course.
So let's start off by talking about let's give the audience of a little bit of a breakdown of what a DAO actually is. And this is not the definitive definition because like many things in this space, it is continuing to evolve. Um, there are people that have different definitions of what a DAO is, and there are different setup structures as far as how a DAO is structured. But let's talk a little bit about what if you hear the word DAO, you're surfing crypto Twitter, and you run across a project that says, oh, we're minting, this is our project, this is our art, this is our utility, we're minting in 2 weeks, and we're going to be a DAO structure. Take a minute, Nate, and let's talk about what that means to just a normal person looking at that, not knowing what's going on. Let's give a quick rundown of what that potentially means involving an NFT project.
Well, I think from a basic level, like it depends on how new we're talking, but for most people, they still don't even know what a DAO is, let alone even if you understand what the acronym stands for, you don't really understand the underlying principle behind it.
Mhm.
Um, I think a lot of people come in and they hear DAO, and those that have been in the space kind of heard DAO and probably not been a part of a successful one or a non-successful one to truly understand like what makes it the way it is. Most people come out and I mean, 6, 7 months ago, everybody and the mom was doing a DAO. It's an easy, I don't want to say cop out for a project, but it's an easy thing to do because you can essentially corral a bunch of people to do anything, and I think there's a benefit to that, but there's also a major downside to one that's few and far between ran correctly. Um, and I think that's the biggest case in point of what I'm getting at. So like you said, I've seen a part of a lot of great DAOs. I've seen a lot of inconsistent DAOs, and I think it's very hard to find one that's ran correctly in the niche that you're probably looking for. And we can get into that here in a little bit. But what's kind of your opinion on the same subject?
Yeah, so I mean, I'm like you. I think that a lot of people that have been in the space for a minute, I mean, they understand. So for those of you that don't, a DAO is a decentralized autonomous organization. Okay, a lot of big words in one sentence, but basically breaking down what it means is that it is an organization, a project, a company that is that the decisions of said organization, project, or company are made by the majority of votes of ownership, right? So basically, it's a democracy of sorts, and we'll explain in a minute why it isn't exactly a democracy, but it is a democracy of sorts. So, and there's levels of DAOs. So I think most people hear that, and basically, I think what the running idea is when the word DAO is thrown out there, it's like, oh, well, the community owns the project, right? That's not necessarily true in any state of the, I mean, in any form of that statement. So what it does mean most of the time is that to at whatever portion of the project, most of the time this just involves treasuries, right? So most of the time when you hear DAO, it really just involves either treasuries or direction of project, right? So what's going to happen when you hear these things is most time you'd be like, well, our treasury is DAO operated. So what that means is, or what they're saying is that when the project decides to make a purchase through the treasury, that the community gets to decide, what they purchase, if they sell something, if they trade something, what they're doing with the assets inside the treasury. Sometimes you will see that if it's an ecosystem project or an art project that's going to be continuing, sometimes that means that they'll say, well, what kind of art direction would you like us to go? And the community will be able to vote. Well, they're like, well, we'd like to see this collection come out, or we'd like to see this particular trade in a subsequent collection, or whatever, right? So there's some decision making that takes place. Personally, I think this is just barely scratching the surface of what DAOs actually are. Okay, and it sounds really good at face value, but what I want to talk about really is, today is I want to talk about how to improve this structure, because it's a very basic structure, and then I want to talk about what are some of the shortcomings that people need to actually think about when you're looking at a DAO. So one of the biggest things is this, and you can kind of expound upon this too. So I find that whenever you're entering a project that states publicly that it's a DAO, I think the first thing you need to do is to decipher what that actually means to said project, right? Because that could mean something as simple as, we're going to allow you guys to vote on what we do with the treasury, right? Okay, well, that sounds pretty standard. But the next question is, well, what does that mean? Does that mean that we're going to have three options that we get to vote on? Does that mean that any community member can bring forth a votable option? Does that mean that we're going to have absolutely any option available? Can I say, hey, we should buy a farm with pigs? Or is that going to be structured into, oh, we can only suggest, digital assets? These are all things you need to know, because it matters, right? It matters because if you get into a DAO where it's absolutely open ended, you know, and some charismatic guy that decides that he wants to, petition the DAO to buy a bunch of ice cream stands in the Antarctic, he can do that, right? I mean, if that's the structure they have. And if he's a charismatic guy, whether he has any kind of business sense or any kind of, actual thought about the DAO's health moving forward, that might actually pass theoretically, right? So you have to look at what the stipulations are on these things and how it's structured. So I think that's one of the biggest things, because I've been involved with some DAOs where they would market the ability to direct the treasury really hard, but then when it came time for those decisions to be made, you'd have like two options that were both brought up by the community members. So it's really just, well, we want to do this or this. You guys can help us decide what you do this or this, which in essence isn't actually a democratic structure, right? So what do you think about that, Nate? What do you think about how people use DAOs as a marketing mechanism when in essence that they really don't have much meat behind them?
Well, like I said, there's successful DAOs and there's non-successful DAOs, and it was easy for everybody to brand themselves as a DAO because it's a very, it's an easy term to understand when you really understand the underlying. And so, like, let me backtrack, and it'll all make sense when we come for a circle. So, DAO is just a fancy term, right? I mean, you see, if you want to, the underlying principle of a DAO, you see it every day in our world, right? If for example, in Metaverse, right, in games, game companies put out surveys to their consumer base to get an idea on what the direction their consumer base would like to see, right?
Hmm.
For example, Fortnite's a great game. It's probably one of the ones that's brought metaverse, different genres into one game, but they only got there by, inquiring from their user base, right? I
Yep.
mean, that is essentially a voting system in itself. So that could be like the first stage of a DAO, right? But ultimately, the power within that still relies with the game company behind the game. They could choose to ignore everything they get, or they could choose to go forward with it. So then you have your next step, which is essentially like a board of directors for a company, for example, right? The board of directors votes, but the reason that that's more successful in a sense is because all of those board members have experience in the field they're in. You're not going to go to an investment firm or a tax consulting agency or whatever, and ask them what you should invest in, in a certain field that they have no jurisdiction in, right? You want to go to
Hmm.
people who understand what they're doing. That's where a DAO starts to become successful. But the problem is in this space, it's so diverse, and most people brand themselves as a DAO with no experience behind how to run it or what they're involved in, which goes back to your case and point on you have to understand what the underlying project is about. And is a DAO even beneficial there? And if it is, how is it structured around whatever they're trying to do? And then you have your next level of essentially a DAO in the real world, which is, you know, the US government is probably one of the best examples. It's not foolproof by any means, but there's a checks and balance system for a voting system on top of it, right? And what I mean by that is, we vote for a presidential election. We vote officials in as a user body. Those officials get voted in, but theoretically, those officials should have still an understanding of what they're voting on when they pass laws. So they don't. So essentially, they're the case in point. They're the speaker and representative for the voting body, right? Because you can't do one without the other. And so when we go back to an actual DAO project, I think the problem with it is that most DAOs, the first line of defense is most DAOs don't have an understanding of what they're doing, let alone the leadership to foresee those DAOs through.
Hmm.
Um, I think most DAOs, the traditional sense, kind of the catch all is that a DAO is a governing body for a treasury or something, right? Which is an investment vehicle. The
Hmm.
problem is that those people that are overseeing and voting in that system, especially in this space, a lot of people get hung up on the PFP photos or what the underlying principle is, or like, hey, this is a great idea, but they don't understand the mechanics that have to go into it and the logistics that are involved. So we've had even people in our own project. I'm not going to call anybody out or anything, but I've seen people in other projects. I've seen people in our project throw out these crazy ideas, and they're good, but they're so far unrealistic. It's like, well, let's invest in this, oil company startup or whatever. Well, it's like, okay, that could be very profitable down the line, but do you know anything about oil? Because I don't
Yeah.
even know where to start with that shit, right? So
Yeah.
it's like, although it's a great idea, the problem with the DAO is, especially a decentralized DAO, is that a successful DAO has to proceed the vote through on whatever it is, right? So if for example somebody puts forth the vote to say, hey, let's liquidate the whole DAO tomorrow, and let's just pile it all into my pet hooligans. Let's just buy every hooligan we can afford to get, right? If somebody
Hmm.
puts that vote forward, theoretically, the DAO, if you're a true DAO, you should vote on it, and it has a chance to pass, right? Hooligans might look more sexy than say, oh, let's divvy this up into yield bearing assets, right? Like nodes or whatever that generate 5% a year, right? Nobody wants 5% a year in this space, but that's the safer bet. But most people go with the sexier look. And theoretically, if that DAO passes that vote as a successful DAO, you should have to execute that no matter how stupid the concept is, because that's what you set out to do.
Yep.
Which goes back to your case in point is some people don't. You have to understand who's behind it, because some people turn around and say, well, that's not feasible, that's a done thing. Well, then are you really a truly DAO at that point, right? Because you voted in a holistic approach, but then you don't see it through. So then it
Yep.
becomes more of like a dictatorship, essentially.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's a great point because, as of there was the last poll I looked at was in June. And as of June, there were over 6,000 DAOs related to NFTs and crypto. very large amount in a couple year period. Well, really only a year and a half period that DAOs started to become popular in the space. And I mean, they range so dramatically. And that you remember in 2021 there was a period where you heard DAO every day, like every
Yeah.
project, every protocol, and then I think that the shift of the market to a more bearish market really showed the flaws in the DAO system, right? Because you had some of these massive DAOs, especially like asset um, purchasing DAOs. I mean, there was crazy ones. I mean, you had Spartan DAO, you had Ambassador DAO, you had core contributors, Protocol DAO, Synthetics DAO, and there's so many of those now that have basically just grinded to a halt to what they're doing because one, they had the community vote on all these things to purchase, and now all those things are crashing and burning, and so the DAOs, overall market cap has dropped drastically, or they only invested in one particular niche, and that niche went under, and there's problems with that, right? So we see a lot of those things.
Yeah.
So I mean, I think it's really easy to find unsuccessful DAOs, and I like
Yeah.
your point earlier when you're talking about it's like when we're talking about a democracy, it's almost like the idea behind a DAO that everyone gets a vote. I don't think that even exactly follows the line of democracy because under a democratic governance system, there is the people select a set group of learned individuals in whatever area, and those that group of learned individuals makes the choices or the laws, so to speak, for the entirety, right? So that's a democratic system. So DAOs, in essence, I don't find the original structure of DAOs as democratic. I almost find them almost anarchist because if you give every single person a vote, then number one, it opens up a it's the same problem that happens with like dictatorship and hierarchy and things like that. Because if you have a very charismatic person, regardless of say that we have John and Bill, and you have John who is a super charismatic person but knows absolutely nothing about what the DAO is set up to. So let's say that they're a real estate DAO, and he absolutely knows nothing about real estate, but he's a super charismatic person, right? So he gets a big following within the DAO that listen to John. Bill, not super charismatic, but he spent 20 years in the real estate sector, right? So the problem is that when you set it up under that structure, that because John is charismatic, he has a higher following in the DAO than what Bill does. Although Bill would make much more informed decisions about the direction of the DAO, right? And that becomes a problem because you have in essence, the idiot making the choices, whereas the learn more, the person that's been in the space for 20 years has less of a pull inside of a DAO. And I think that's one of the inherent problems with the DAO structure
Yeah.
is because we reward charisma, and I mean charisma is not a bad thing, but you can be as charismatic as you want. That doesn't make you an expert or even learned in any field, right? So there's a problem there. So I think that's something to look into. Now, one of the things I wanted to ask you particularly was, maybe let's talk a little bit about a particular DAO structure that you've seen that has worked, well, in the sense that it has been successful thus far, or it has shown the ability to evolve with the market. And let's talk about that for a minute. Let's talk about a successful DAO structure, and we'll talk about what they're doing right, and then potentially what they could do to make those structures better.
Yeah. So I'm going to talk about two first. And the first one is not really branded as a DAO by any means, but everybody's so familiar with it that you'll understand, especially in Web3. So, right. So you've got nodes and, delegate systems of staking and stuff, right?
Mhm.
Those essentially are DAOs for all intents and purposes, right? The delegators are essentially the ones that execute commands back to the nodes, right? To a centralized node or whatever, right? So when you go to stake something, for example, you as an interested party, right? Let's say I have Ethereum. Ethereum's going to staking, right? I'm going to stake my 32 Ethereum, on the network, right? That's successful because I hold a vested interest in whatever Ethereum does. I'm not just going to say, oh, I'm a big whale. I don't give a shit. I'm just going to vote however I want to vote, right?
Mhm.
Ethereum is so decentralized to a sense that it's so spread out. You don't have one whale that holds 90% of the supply that can run it. So, as an interested party, I'm looking long term. I'm going to vote in Ethereum's best interest because it's in my best interest. But I have to corral everybody to a certain degree because you can't just throw out a vote and have everybody vote. We've seen DAOs try that. The problem is the turnaround time to execute even quick itemized items. Sometimes it takes weeks to get people to actually participate and vote, right?
Mhm.
So is it really a vote when you have 20% of the population actually voting, right? You have to
Yep.
give people enough time frame to cast their vote, and the turnaround time is low. But as a delegated system, I stake my Ethereum. I have a stake in the network, so I'm going to vote in the network's best interest. And those delegators essentially handle all of the next level shit per se past that, right? I've just cast my vote. I'm good to go. The delegators are what handle all of the execution and all that on the back end to make the whole network run. You can't do that with every single person voting and executing all at once, right? So you
Yep.
have to have some sort of elected official to run it for you. So going back to an actual DAO, right? The one that I keep going back to, and is Pixel Vault. Anybody not familiar with the Pixel Vault system? They are an NFT project. They are building a metaverse game that's going to be a AAA game, and they're also building a side game, which will be a small, web browser based, whatever you want to call it. It's something to kind of carry over while they're having Unity and all the developers develop out their thing. So
Yeah.
they have three different divisions of their project that is a governing body, and this is why I think it's successful because they took a stint out of what the U.S. government does because you can't just have one DAO and run it, right? So they
Mhm.
broke up their entire project into three governing bodies. They have the Pixel Vault, which is the company itself, right? Holders don't hold value in the Pixel Vault company itself. The company makes the underlying decisions on how to function as a whole. Then
Mhm.
they have the planetary DAO system, which is going to be part of the game, and they're going to vote in the game's best interest, right? And
Yep.
everything that involves in that ecosystem. As a holder of a planet, right, you participate in the DAO structure, so you are part of the DAO. And then they have the founders DAO, which is essentially the controlling body of their quote unquote treasury, or the actual DAO that holds all of their NFT assets from all the different projects across their entire ecosystem. Part of
Mhm.
what they do is, if the funds raised and stuff, some of that goes back to the treasury to
Yep.
to be as a governing body. The reason that works so successful is because they divvied up power. So even if the entire treasury gets voted to do something completely idiotic, you still have the company that's making their own decisions, but behind the underlying product. And then you have the game's planetary DAO that is governing decisions within the game itself. So there's a
Mhm.
checks and balance system to some degree. And at the end of the day, right, you are a holder voting in the best interest. And the entire reason that DAO in itself for Pixel Vault works so successfully is because they execute it no matter what the decision is. Period. Um,
Mhm.
so if you're an advocate of a DAO structure, it theoretically it should matter how stupid the concept is. But if they chose to liquidate that entire treasury, they should have to execute that. That is the whole point of a DAO. It's the
Yep.
same thing. If we vote in just this stupid president, right? Whoever you want to, whatever name you want to assign to it, Billy Bob Thornton, or Keanu Reeves, or an actual politician. It doesn't matter. As the voting principle of the governing body votes in favor, that execution gets essentially executed, right? That
Yep.
command and that president gets elected. Period. It doesn't
Mhm.
matter, and that's what makes it successful.
Yeah, I agree with you like heavily on that. So I think that we're going to find out in the coming years that I think that we're going to see these DAO structures evolve because number one, I agree with you that DAOs are slow, right? Their decision making is very slow. They can't be that there you can't have a DAO operate a like a NFT collection or a protocol based around trading, right? because you have to be able to execute, and you can't execute within minutes or hours using a DAO. So I think that you're going to start seeing the itemization of these things, right? So it makes perfect sense to be able to have a long-term treasury, or like that can be structured as a DAO, or governance of a game like that can be structured as a DAO, because the decisions don't have to be made instant to instant, right? But so I think that we're going to start seeing more hybrid systems. I think like Pixel Vault has done. I think that we're going to start seeing these portions of projects broken up into different governing systems, and I think that that's going to be a big thing moving forward, because the DAO structure is like the U.S. government. It's very freaking slow, right? I mean, the U.S. government can't
Yeah.
execute anything instantly in very few cases, right? It takes months and months of debate and bringing to the floor and the House and the Senate and all these type of things. So a DAO operates the same way. So now also inside the crypto space, you will see, the other side of this is, we see how a democratic government operates, but what we also need to see is how like privately owned businesses operate, right? There's a much faster structure there. So if you have a privately owned business and they're building a product, if they make a decision, they can enact that decision instantly. If you have like a founder, a CEO,
Yeah.
or a group of founders together, they can make decisions quite quickly. And so you'll notice that in some other NFT projects that are like game based, or so a good example is like non fungible arcade, right? So they don't have a DAO structure in how they're building their games out. So if they make a decision, hey, we want to add a collabed character to this game with so many different collab powers. Most recently, I think they were bringing on the Kaiju Kings, and they just, they make that decision, they add it to the game, and there it is. There doesn't have to be a voting system to that. So there are places, I believe, for founders and developers to be making decisions when it's related to products and things like that. And there is a place for communities to be making decisions when we're talking about long-term investments, when we're talking about developments of entire ecosystems. It's going to take 10 years to fully go out. There are places there, checks and balances for those things. um,
Yeah.
I think that one of the other big questions is moving forward is that there is a certain amount of anarchy in the NFT space to begin with, because we're talking about cryptocurrencies and blockchain technology, and we're talking about immutability, and we're talking about everyone is responsible for their own holdings and their own assets and their own transactions and all these type of things, which is a fantastic thing, right? That's on an individual level. So I'm an absolute component of sovereignty on an individual level. But when we're starting to talk about products coming out to market, which NFT collections are products,
Yep.
right? They're artistic products, they're utility products. When we start talking about products, that kind of supersedes sovereignty, because it's not just me developing a product, right? It's me
Yeah.
and you and 1,000 other community members that are involved with this product. And sovereignty doesn't work that well with product development and with
Yeah.
these large things. So there has to be a balance. We've got to find a balance in crypto and in blockchain technology, because if not, you're just going to have a bunch of loose cannons out there, single people making decisions with of groups with thousands of NFTs, or hundreds of thousands in some cases. So there has to be a balance moving forward. So in my opinion, what I think we see over the next few years, especially during the bear market, because it's going to make people really have to think and reassign and be like, listen, we have to make the right choices with our project. So what I tend to think is going to happen is we're going to see like two separate structures. I think the DAO structures are going to turn into, yes, we operate under a structure where we listen to the community. However, the community propositions are going to have to be brought by a certain group of people. So say elected officials is like hierarchy, just like we do with the government system. And then these, elected people will bring so many propositions up. So there's a filtering process of what's possible, what isn't. These elected people know more about the particular industry or structure of the DAO, and then the entirety of the community will vote on said, proposals. I think that that'll be more how the structure like moves towards. And then on the other hand, I believe that you're going to have some of these many NFT collections that just operate off of, one or two founders, three or four founders, five or six founders that have either a cult of personality that they're developing a product, or they have a game that they're developing, where the developers are going to make all of the decisions moving forward, because that is in essence a product, and the community is simply
Yep.
purchasers of the product, right? So I think we need to make that distinction. Is an NFT project a product? And in my opinion, a product is a game, art, a utility tool. These type of things are products. So when do they need to be a product that's led by an individual that understands the product and that's building the product, or a group of individuals? And then you have your DAO systems, which are massive ecosystem build outs, long term investment protocols, fractionalization groups, things like that, where the DAO structure fits properly. I think those are going to be the two biggest structures of what we see moving forward. What's your thoughts on that?
No, I mean, I agree, and I'm going to take a step back for a sec because you touched on it briefly, but I kind of want to elaborate on it. I think there's three main problems in my mind currently, and make no mistake, somebody is going to figure out a way to get this to work effectively going forwards. I it's just like anything, like I said in the row, we see, DAO structures, whether it's voting systems, whether it's democracy, whether it's, corporations, and the way they structure the boards or whatever. Like, those things are here, and we're taking, a page out of each one of those books, and there's different ways to run it, but no one way is 100% correct.
Yeah.
But somebody will figure it out. I think that, in my mind, the only way to make this thing successful going forward, to make it truly autonomous, is those votes need to be put on a smart contract, period. Because the underlying problem that I have with DAOs is that, let's say you elect, let's say you're running a DAO treasury, right? Okay, great. Everybody is voting on which assets to acquire that stuff. Okay, you as a community member have a say. That's perfect. But somebody still has to execute all that stuff on the back end.
Uh-huh.
And at the end of the day, you can essentially turn around and say, well, um, we're going to do that, but what if that person dies? Or what if that person just falls off the face there? What if they hold the wallet? They can turn around and just run away with those assets. It's not
Right.
truly a DAO at that point. You voted, but nobody's executed. So
Yep.
how do you instill a trustless execution system? And that would be a smart contract. The other problem is that when you're talking about a corporation or a democracy, right? The masses are what make up the diversification and the decentralization. Um, when you're talking about an NFT project or a crypto project, the problem is that the communities are too small in my mind. So
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't take a lot for one whale to hold a good controlling portion, of 8% of the vote, right?
Yeah.
And that can be beneficial sometimes, but it can also be a weak point in the fact that somebody could just go out and acquire as many assets as they want, and it's twofold. One, they hold more voting power, which
Yep.
could be a problem, or it could be a blessing if that person has any sort of experience in the field that they're in and what they're voting on. But
Yep.
two, there's peer pressure, because most voting systems, if everybody doesn't know, most voting systems that are currently out there, part of the decentralized aspect is you may not know who's behind what wallet, but you can see how many votes they cast and what they cast
Yep.
in favor of or didn't.
Yep.
And it becomes a peer pressure system, because me as an individual, let's say I don't hold as much as the top holder, but I saw the top holder voted in favor of electing, XX and X, right?
Mm-hmm.
My one little measly vote, I may not vote in favor of that, but my vote, I can already tell right off the bat, my vote it's not going to sway anything. So what's the point in voting no, right? So
Yeah.
most people just get in there and they'll vote yes along with it. And it becomes a peer pressure system. And that's the problem, right?
Yeah.
It's not diversified enough. At 10,000 holders, even at Pixel Vault's thing, they have what, like 7,000 or so? I can't remember the exact number,
Yeah.
but on their founders DAO, they have under 10,000, let's say. That is
Yeah.
not enough to truly create a structured, diversified system that's evenly
Yeah.
balanced, especially when so and so, I can go look at wallets right now that hold 20 or 30 of those things.
Yeah.
And at some point the voting is not equal across the board.
Yeah. Well, and I think another that's a great point because in the real world when we look at these structures, there are reasons why with publicly traded companies, which are what a lot of these NFT collections and DAO systems are, that there are laws that protect against monopolies or protect against individuals or entities owning more than a certain percentage of said company, right? Because that's a
Mm,
problem. It is because with an NFT collection, some of these NFT collections have a sub a million market cap or a couple million market cap, and someone that
yep,
wanted to buy 51% of the votes could do that, and then in essence could control everything that went on, despite what those other 49% wanted, right? So there's a
yep,
problem there, and the way that we fix that in the real world is by regulation, right? But there's a
yep,
problem with that in the crypto space because you can regulate to an extent, but you can't regulate a smart contract, right? You can't regulate what an
yeah,
algorithm, a cryptography does. So there's going to have to be some hybrid solution to that because we can't just say, I mean, a government could say, hey, well, it's illegal to own this much of any, DAO related NFT project. You can only own, up to 7% or whatever. They can say that, but this is not like being online and being on the blockchain and on the internet. It's unregulatable, right? To an extent, it
yeah,
just is. So there has to be some way using using smart contracts or a trustless system that protects against that. And I think that's things we'll see in development, over the next
yeah,
couple of years as things move on. It's going to be interesting. I mean, it really is because the crazy thing about blockchain technology and cryptocurrency is you always have to find a solution that doesn't give power to any one individual, right, or any group of individuals, and that's what
yep,
makes it trustless, and that's what makes it what it is. So it's going to be interesting seeing those things move on, but I agree with everything you're saying. I agree that those are the biggest problems that we currently see with the current structure of DAOs, autonomous organizations. And I think it's going to be a big topic of discussion and a big topic of I don't know if we've made it through the entire cycle of hype and FUD as far as like DAOs are concerned because you see some success stories, some successfully run ones, like I mean MakerDAO has run pretty well and it went through a whole cycle. There's a DAO that Aave is operated on, a DAO that's been very
yep,
successful over that time frame. But most of these successful DAOs are operated because it's the voters are holders of the governance token, and it's not beneficial for them to do anything that would topple the structure of the DAO, right? So I mean that thus far that's been kind of the safety for products like like Aave, but
yeah,
there are inherent issues because we hear about these issues all the time that that there was a stop on a DAO vote because of this. There was a DAO that during the initial drop in the bull market, there was a DAO that voted to take control of an individual's wallet and not allow
yeah,
them to sell off their tokens, which that goes against the entire
yep,
thesis of what a DAO system is. So there's still problems because that shouldn't be something that's able to happen. It was something that needed to happen because the entire protocol could have crashed and burned without that. But it's something that there needs to be a workaround, right? We need to find some way
yeah,
to work around these projects. So in my opinion, I would tell anyone that is investing in these type of structures currently that they're very, very new and that you
yeah,
need to you need to do tons of due diligence and understand what is going on with what you're buying into because it's super early, man. And if you look into just like a country a new country that's formed and that has years and years of tumultuousness around setting up their government system, it's the same thing we're going to see with these basic governance systems in crypto. It's going to take a while before we stop seeing these issues, because there has to be fixes going around them. So I would just preach caution to anyone that is looking to get into a DAO. Not to say that there's not great structures out there, and great investment opportunities, but I would definitely preach, discretion, because DAOs haven't even been around as long as, like, DeFi has, and we still see a lot of issues with DeFi. I mean, we've basically seen the entire collapse of DeFi 2.0, as and people are now reverting back to the DeFi 1.0, which was the original DeFi structures, which was Compound and Aave, and these are the ones that lasted. So the quote unquote upgraded versions of DeFi weren't really upgraded versions, and we're going to see the same thing with DAOs. They're going to be systems that come out that are going to look better, that end up being worse, and we'll have to reevaluate, move forward. But eventually, we will find something that works properly in the way it's supposed to work. So that would be my thoughts on that. Sorry, I had a
Yeah,
fly buzzing around my face.
and
Uh,
I'll note, I don't most likely when we come back to the next bull market, you're going to have somebody that spins off and says, "Oh, we fixed the DAO problems," right? And 6 or 7 months ago, 8 months ago, you were seeing DAOs not just in NFTs, but you were seeing DAOs in coin protocols and all this
yep,
stuff that
yep,
promised 40,000 returns. The first week they launched, and
yep,
Jesus Christ, please do not invest in those things. Every
yep.
single one of those never works out. They've all come crashed and burned. And trust me, Kenny and I, you and I have both been there. We've tried that shit. We've learned from our mistakes
Uh,
because, it seemed like a great theory when it came out, you know, and then you realize this is not sustainable by any means. And the only people that win are the ones that got in, right at the beginning, and the ones that sold, their bags to you, essentially.
yep.
Like that's the
Well,
only way that it works.
yeah. Well, to also jump on that, guys. So here's a thesis here. So the way that, if this is basic economics, right? So for a group of people to continue to get value out of a product or service, okay, one of two things has to happen. There either has to be more people come on that want to use that product or service, onboarding of more people, okay, which is how the basic pyramid scheme works. It's like you have your initial people, and as long as more people keep coming on, everybody's making money. But at some point, people stop coming on, the money dries up, and then those people at the bottom tier of the pyramid make nothing, right? So that either has to happen, or the product protocol service has to continue to develop new value out of nothing, right? So they have to create new value, because if you're creating value, then you can continue to everyone can continue to benefit from that. But those things have to happen. So the problem is with these protocols like Jade protocol, the Spartan protocol, like these you know quote unquote DAO structures and quote unquote community, structures that promised 10,000% gains a month and all these type of things. They were operating off of the idea that we keep bringing people on, and that continues to bring value. But in the long term, to for everyone to win, for everyone to be able to make it, which regardless of what people say, there is a possibility for a product to come out and for everyone involved with the product to continue to make it. But the problem is that product has to continually bring value. They have to continually create value. And that's a very difficult thing, because you can bring initial value in a product. Like, so Alpha Mutants, for instance, we're trying to bring an affordable entry into higher end utility and education, to the space. That's our initial value. But as we gain people, as we continue to gain community members and bring this stuff on, if we do not continue to develop new value moving forward, then eventually you hit this roadblock to where the newer members coming in get less and less value, right? So that's the structure, and to do that, you need to, one, continue to monetize the value you're bringing out. You have to continue to develop as you're bringing out each product and moving forward, and that's the structure that is sustainable. Once you see a product or a company or a protocol, if they just rest on the laurels of one product or without continued development, everyone isn't going to win, right? Eventually, you're going to have your bag holders in the end because every product needs development. All right. That's what, cars are not the same today as they were in 1950. And there's a reason for that because there's been continued development. If you're holding a car from a mass produced car from the 1950s, it's not worth really much anything these days. There are exceptions, collectibles, and in NFTs, you have to think about like the scarcity aspect also. But when you're talking about actual utility, there has to be further development, right? You can't race a car from 1950 against a car from 2020. There is no comparison, right? And that's the same thing that has to happen with these structures moving forward, these protocols. So, I'm with Nate. There's that old saying that says if something sounds too good to be true, it probably it's probably not true. And I think I can tell you emphatically that mathematically it's too good to be true, right? There has to be sustainability and I hope that one of the things that we're trying to do with Alpha Mutants is to always be the contrarian, to always say, well, when everyone jumps in and says, oh, this is the greatest thing ever, and this is so much value, and there's all this stuff here, we are the ones that have to say, well, I mean, let's look at this. Like, let's look at this. Let's see what they're promising and what they can potentially be gaining from this, because at some point those things have to correlate properly, or it's just a lie, right? It's just a marketing scheme, or it's a pyramid scheme, or whatever it is. But yeah, I mean, I think that's a a really good point, Nate. Well, we're getting up to about the end of the episode here. So I hope you guys liked, me and Nate's back and forth banter on DAOs. And with topics like this, there is no, certifiably right answer, because we're talking about things that are so early in development that they can go a lot of different ways, and there's no perfect structure yet. But I hope you guys learn from this to think critically and to think from first principles, and to look at things always with a critical eye, and to examine how can they be better, what did they bring of value, and how can that value get better. And I hope you guys learn some things like that, and I hope you have a better understanding of what the current DAO structures look like and what they could potentially be in the future. But anyway, Nate, do you have any final thoughts or statements regarding DAOs and just people looking into them, or any final thoughts on that?
Yeah, I would just say, the easiest thing to ask yourself is, like you said in the beginning, is what they're doing, is there a true need for a DAO? Because 90% of the time the answer is no.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't want to open yourself up to that risk, because like you said, going back to that, you know, the self-autonomousness and, the self-custody and all that stuff from an individual level is great within blockchain, but right now it just doesn't work as a conglomerate whole, right?
Yeah.
And so if there's not a use case for it, like if you can do it, if a project does it without the need for a DAO, it's probably not needed, and you're taking on more risk than it should be there.
Yep. Yeah, I 100%. And I would say, if there was a meta last year of projects that transitioned to DAOs when they were already working projects. And I think that's insane. I think it's insane to take something that is working properly and then try to move it to the system just because it happens to be the buzzword at the time. It's ridiculous. So I mean, a good example with Alpha Mutants, those of you that have been with us for a while, you know that we were originally a rugged project that was quote unquote based around a DAO, a very poorly set up DAO, but that was what it was. And when we rebranded the product, we had to have these difficult conversations. We had to say, is a DAO structure technically needed with what we're doing? And as we are looking to build out an ecosystem, that could accompany, media and continued project drops and utility development and these things that have to have choices made quickly and continued development. We decided that a DAO structure wasn't needed. That the maximum benefit for the community would be the what we could build as an ecosystem. And that's not to say that we don't want to be transparent. I think we're one of the most transparent projects out there. We announce everything we do, but we're not going to vote on everything we do. Because we want to have experts telling us like, hey, this is, we don't want to have voting on the art system by people that have never drew anything in their life, right? We want an artist to tell us, hey, this is doable, this isn't. And the same thing with coding and investments in these types of things. We want people that know what they're doing to be able to do it. And I think that's what we need to ask ourselves. It's a perfect thing. Is a DAO structure needed? Is it not needed? But I think that's great. So Anyway, guys, the closing up. If you like the episode, like, subscribe. It helps us get out to more people. It helps us be more visible. Appreciate everyone watching. I will have the links to the Alpha Mutants socials down below. If you're not in the socials and are not aware, we will be doing our second minting batch. We minted out our first 1,000 about a week and a half ago. We will be minting out our next 1,000 on September the 9th. So jump to the Discord to see how you get involved with that. Our collection is open on OpenSea, so I'll have a link to that below. And then also follow the channel here, but also follow Nate's YouTube channel if you haven't already. He doesn't do weekly drops, but he does periodic drops on utility tools and on instructional videos in the space. He's got a couple videos posted about how to get started leverage trading. Which if you've been in our Discord in the last 24 hours and you've taken some of our bot calls, you're probably pretty excited about leverage trading because they were fantastic. I think even without leverage trading, we did like a 14-15% call on ETH that worked out there in the last couple days. So if you were doing a leverage trade in that, it could have been a really great trade. So definitely check out Nate's videos on that and follow him. So I'll have those linked below. But besides that, Nate, appreciate you being here today. Appreciate all you guys for watching. We'll be back next week on Web3 Weekly, and I'll see you guys later.